sweet like a buttercup. You're a Barbie doll. Show them all what I'm made of. Strut down the hall. Won't stop till I get enough.
All right, let's jump right in. We're going deep on Sean Diddy Combs today.
Diddy, yeah.
With this new documentary coming out, Diddy, The Making of a Bad Boy. Premiering on Peacock January 14th, 2025.
Right.
And the article we're looking at, well, it suggests a possible connection between Diddy's wild upbringing and the legal trouble he's in now.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, it's definitely a timely topic.
Yeah.
Especially with Diddy awaiting trial in New York, those sex trafficking charges, all tied to those freak-offs he supposedly threw.
Freak-offs. Okay, what exactly were those?
Basically, gatherings known for being super over the top.
Okay.
Sexually charged atmosphere. And the documentary, it seems to be looking into Diddy's past, trying to find a connection to his current situation.
So where's this connection coming from?
Well, the article focuses on Tim Dog Patterson.
Okay.
Diddy's childhood friend and producer. He's featured a lot in the documentary.
Right.
And he describes these parties that Diddy's mom, Janice Combs, used to have. He says young Diddy was exposed to a lot. Drugs, alcohol, even adults, doing it.
Wow. That's quite a bit for a kid to be around.
Yeah, it's definitely not your average childhood.
No, not at all. Patterson describes it with pimps, pushers, drug addicts. It wasn't just a casual gathering.
No, not at all. And Patterson, he kind of suggests that this might have been desensitizing for Diddy.
Yeah.
Maybe it shaped how he views sex and parties. Basically, he's implying that being around that stuff so young, it could make it seem normal.
It makes you wonder about the long-term impact, for sure.
Right.
But just to be clear, Patterson doesn't say this directly caused Diddy's actions as an adult, right?
Exactly. He's not saying it's a direct cause, just that there might be a link,
Right, a connection, but not necessarily a direct cause.
Yeah, it's correlation, not causation.
Okay, so it's an interesting piece of the puzzle. The documentary is exploring if these early experiences shaped Diddy's worldview. But we need to look at what Diddy himself said, too, right? He was pretty open in that 1999 Vibe interview.
Right, that Vibe interview. That's really important. It gives us Diddy's perspective on his early experiences with sex.
Okay.
He reveals some pretty personal stuff, like losing his virginity at 12 and starting to masturbate at 11 while watching softcore porn.
That was a big reveal, even for the late 90s.
Yeah. Yes.
How common was that kind of early exposure back then? Was Diddy's experience reflecting a bigger trend?
It's hard to say for sure.
Yeah.
But research on adolescent behavior back then does suggest that, exposure to sexual stuff was becoming more and more common in the 90s.
Right, with cable TV and the internet becoming more popular?
Yeah, exactly. And there was definitely a trend of the media pushing the limits, showing more sexuality.
So Diddy being open about it, it might have been unusual for a celebrity, but maybe not that unusual for what some young people were experiencing?
Yeah, that's one way to look at it.
Okay.
It's also worth noting that Diddy always, cultivated this image of himself as a ladies' man, comfortable with his sexuality.
Right.
So this interview, it could have been him intentionally reinforcing that image.
Right, playing into that image. Speaking of comfort with sexuality, there was that other detail in the Vibe interview.
Yeah.
While he's talking about all this, Jennifer Lopez, his girlfriend at the time, is on his tour bus watching HBO's Real Sex.
Oh, wow. Real Sex was pretty groundbreaking.
It was explicit, yeah.
Yeah, exploring all kinds of, sexual stuff.
What do you make of that detail? Does it support this idea of Diddy being super comfortable with open sexuality?
Well, it's hard to say for sure based on just that.
Right.
It does add another layer, though. Suggests that maybe open talk about sex, even watching that kind of stuff together, was part of their thing.
Yeah.
Could just be a coincidence, of course.
Of course.
We can't really know for sure what it meant.
Yeah. So we have this glimpse into Diddy's upbringing and personal life, but we need to come back to the documentary and the sex trafficking allegations.
Yeah, right.
That's serious stuff.
Exactly. And the documentary, it looks into that too, showing a more troubling side.
Okay.
One of Diddy's associates, they claim red lights were used as a signal for sex parties at his places.
Wow.
Some allegedly with underage girls.
That's a serious accusation. Do we know anything else about the signal system or who was involved?
The article doesn't really give more details.
Okay.
It's just that one anonymous source. We have to be careful about taking that as fact.
Right, of course.
But the allegations themselves are really serious. If it's true, it's a disturbing picture.
It's definitely a contrast to the image of Diddy as, this successful music mogul, a cultural icon.
Yeah, definitely. And it raises questions about power, consent, the potential exploitation of young women.
All themes the documentary seems to be exploring. So we're left with this multi-layered story, glimpses into Diddy's past, his upbringing, his personal life, maybe shedding light on his views about sex, and these really serious allegations. It's a lot.
Yeah, it is. It reminds us that people are complex.
Right.
Their lives aren't simple. We try to put people in boxes, good or bad.
Yeah.
But reality is usually much more nuanced.
And in Diddy's case, it seems like his story's still unfolding.
Exactly. It's one chapter in a long, complicated story.
Okay, let's take a pause here. We've got more to unpack. We need to go deeper into these allegations.
Yeah.
Look at the potential impact on Diddy's career and legacy, and what does this all mean in a bigger sense?
I'm sure the documentary will give us even more to think about.
Right. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
It's kind of like we're putting together this puzzle with all these pieces of Diddy's past, right? On one hand, you've got the successful mogul who built this empire, but then you have these accusations that make you question everything.
It's hard to process. We're looking for connections, but it's not easy.
No, not at all. It's tempting to just draw a straight line and say, well, because of this, he did that. But it's never that simple, is it?
No, you can't just reduce it all down to a single cause, right?
Exactly. People are more complicated than that. We're shaped by our experiences, but they don't control every decision we make.
Okay, but can we just ignore those early experiences altogether? I mean, there's some patterns here. The parties, the exposure to sex, the comfort with pushing boundaries. It's hard to ignore that.
I agree. It's worth thinking about how those experiences might have affected him. Think about desensitization. If you're exposed to something over and over, it can start to seem less shocking, right?
Yeah, like growing up in a family where everyone yells all the time, you might not realize it's weird until you see how other families interact.
Exactly. And it's not just individual experiences either. We have to consider the cultural context, too. The 90s, when Diddy was coming up, that was a time when attitudes about sex were changing.
Right, especially in hip-hop culture, where there was this focus on masculinity and, being a player.
Exactly. I'm not saying that excuses any harmful behavior, but it's important to acknowledge that cultural norms can have an influence.
So how do we make sense of it all? The potential influence of his upbringing, the changing social landscape, and then these serious accusations. It's like, how do you even approach that?
It's a real challenge. We have to be careful not to jump to conclusions. What we can do is look at the information we have, try to identify patterns, and try to understand the complexities without oversimplifying.
It's like we're detectives, right? But the evidence is scattered and open to interpretation.
Right, and that's where the documentary comes in. It's going to explore these questions and offer different perspectives on Diddy's life.
Speaking of the documentary, that detail about the red lights really stuck with me. That one of his associates claimed they were a signal for sex parties, maybe even involving underage girls.
Yeah, that's a really disturbing allegation. And it raises a lot of questions like, who else knew about these parties? What did they do? Were there any measures in place to protect vulnerable individuals?
It makes you think about the power dynamics involved. Diddy, with all his success and influence, would have had a lot of power over the people around him. It's possible people were afraid to speak out.
Absolutely. That's a common pattern in situations where there's an imbalance of power. People might stay silent because they fear the consequences.
It's a reminder that even people who seem to have it all can be capable of doing bad things.
Right. It highlights the importance of accountability. No one, regardless of their status, should be above the law.
But we have to remember, these are still allegations. He hasn't been convicted. He deserves a fair process.
Of course, we can't assume guilt before the legal system has run its course.
But regardless of the outcome, these allegations have definitely affected his public image.
Yeah, his image has taken a hit. This whole situation brings up questions about fame, power, and responsibility.
Do you think this will change how people see his music? Will they still be able to separate the artist from the art?
It's hard to say. Some fans might be able to compartmentalize. Others might find it impossible to listen to his music without thinking about the accusations.
It's a complex issue with no easy answers. I'm sure the documentary will explore those nuances.
I think that's one of the best things about documentaries like this. They can spark conversations and challenge us to think critically about tough issues.
And in this case, those conversations might cover celebrity culture, the exploitation of women, consent. So much to think about.
It is. But it's important to engage with these topics, even if they make us uncomfortable.
Agreed. Okay, let's switch gears a bit and talk about the impact this might have on Diddy's career moving forward.
All right, let's get into it.
That documentary title, Diddy, The Making of a Bad Boy, it really makes you think about the image he's built. the swagger, that rebellious vibe.
Yeah, it's a very calculated image, and it's definitely helped him succeed.
It's part of his brand, for sure. But now, with these allegations, that image is being questioned in a serious way.
It makes you wonder how much of Diddy is real and how much is just like an act. And it's mostly an act. Does that make the alleged behavior any better?
That's a tough one. We all have different sides to ourselves. We act different ways in different situations.
Right.
But actions have consequences no matter what.
Yeah. In the end, you have to hold people accountable for what they do.
But it makes you wonder, would he have been as successful without that bad boy image? Was it all part of the appeal?
That's something people will probably be debating for a long time. It was definitely a big part of his image, especially early on.
So where does this leave his legacy? Will he be remembered as a musical innovator, or will these allegations overshadow everything?
It's too early to say for sure. Time usually gives us a better perspective on these things. But yeah, these accusations have definitely hurt his image.
And with social media these days, everything spreads so fast, it's hard to control the narrative.
It's true. But it also gives him a chance, right? He has a huge platform. He could use it to address this directly.
Do you think he will? What would that even look like?
He could use his platform to support victims of abuse, raise awareness, encourage people to speak out, get help.
That would be powerful. It would mean showing a totally different side of herself.
That wouldn't be easy, but it could be a way for him to make something good come out of this bad situation. Use his influence for real change.
But it would also mean taking responsibility for his actions, acknowledging the harm that was done.
Absolutely. That's a decision he has to make himself.
Yeah, it's a defining moment for him, for sure. Yeah. How he handles this will be interesting to watch.
And how the public reacts too, Ro. Will people forgive him? Will they boycott his music? Or will it all just blow over?
It's hard to predict, but this story is not over yet, that's for sure.
And it brings up some important questions, about power, accountability, what it means to be human.
It reminds us that everyone makes mistakes, even people who seem to have it all. And sometimes our choices have consequences that we don't see coming.
I think this deep dive has given our listeners a lot to consider.
I hope it encourages them to check out the documentary Diddy, The Making of a Bad Boy, when it airs. It's going to be a fascinating look at a complicated person and a really important time in hip-hop.
And until next time, keep diving deep.
There's always more beneath the surface.
Sound the alarm. I'm coming up. We'll have a ball. I'm sweet like a buttercup. You're a Barbie doll.